Hey everybody, I'm Molly Gordon. Welcome to the June 2015 Wholeness Hangout, where we explore and connect with our innate capacity, innate reality of wholeness and well-being and wisdom. And I am very, very excited today to have two guests from the UK, Steve Adair and Tony Fiedler. I'll tell you a little bit about Steve and Tony, and then they can tell you more about who they are and what they do. I met Steve and Tony actually a year ago today. They were reminding me on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia, Canada. We were all at the School for the Three Principles with Elsie Spittle and Chip Chipman, and enjoyed the school and also had a lovely lunch. I think Sherry Ray and Susan Motherall were with us, if memory serves. And I was so struck by the quality of presence, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute, of these two gentlemen. There is an authenticity and genuineness and simplicity and clarity that comes with their presence that I just love hanging out in. Around the Three Principles world, you often hear people say things like, she's got a really nice feeling, or she shows up in a nice feeling. And I was just thinking this morning that for me, Steve and Tony embody this feeling quality that we talk about in the principles. And maybe we'll even explore a little bit about what the heck we mean by that as we talk today. Let me tell you a bit about who they are. Steve is an international speaker, trainer, and Three Principles-based practitioner. He and Tony are co-directors of Three Principles Life and Soul. And his particular commitment is to supporting you to realize your true identity and to uncover innate mental health and bring unlimited balance and delight and depth to life. Steve has long been fascinated by how people think and behave, and that's guided him, along with his passion for helping people, to work with the human potential field since 1991. He studied and practiced as a coach and trainer and mentor and peer educator, and he's also a qualified psychotherapeutic counselor. Tony has a diverse career in both the corporate and third sector. Tony, what's a third sector?
Yeah, what is the third sector? Charity.
Charity, okay. What we call nonprofit in the US.
Nonprofit, yeah, right.
Okay, great. He's heaps of experience there in management, training, and coaching. And in early 2011, Tony came across the Three Principles, attending a seminar with Jamie Smart and Aaron Turner. Since then, he's completed intensives with Aaron Turner, George and Linda Pransky. But he says his most significant experience of deepening his understanding was gained through fellowship with Chip Chipman and Elsie Spittle, a 6-week program in 2012. Tony co-runs the Three Principles practice with Steve in Bedfordshire, UK, also in London, and he works with individuals and practitioner development. Guys, what else would you like people to know about you, your background, and the work you do?
Well, I guess, first of all, Molly, thank you so much for inviting us on to this hangout. It's such an honor, privilege to be here.
Yeah.
And indeed, a year after we were hanging out in Salt Spring. So funny how these things work out, eh?
Right.
I guess for me, yeah, the bio is pretty accurate, but more and more it feels to me like our lives are just progress in the moment. And, you know, in addition to those things, we're just flowing with life more and more. And it's kind of interesting hearing that coming back, because I'm a lot looser on on that stuff now. So I'm kind of gone back to doing some work in the not-for-profit right now, doing some training, and hopefully to be taking the innate health 3 principles understanding in to just to help the organisation I'm with go a bit deeper in the work they're doing, and also work with their clients by getting behind the scenes into people's psychological, spiritual understandings of life. So if you want to add anything about yourself there.
No, I think just to echo, it's great, Molly, to be taking this time out, and whoever is joining us, then a great big welcome from us. It's always interesting when you kind of send these bios out of who you kind of in that moment make up who you believe you are.
Right.
It's so funny. It's like, oh, I forgot that part. So that's kind of, oh, really? Must change that part. And it's just so interesting how we see that something at once we were so sure that defines who I am, that doesn't kind of fit me anymore. So that was just interesting seeing that. And it's yeah, I think that the bio does cover it well. It's seeing everything that we're very passionate about, and there is the kind of community side. But for us, what has been quite excited that the topic is guided by the feeling of wisdom, and really that for us is something certainly this year more so than what since we've come into this, but really all of our life, to just really be aware of how the twists and turns of life really kind of just fall into place without sometimes feeling as if we've had to do nothing but just sit back and trust. And obviously wake up, when we were talking before we came on air about getting up early and our times of getting up early and so on, but it's just trusting that I joked there about that's who I was at the beginning and this is how I see myself now, and knowing that tomorrow I'm even going to see myself as stuff later on today. It's like just gone 5 o'clock here. By the time I get to maybe 9, 10 o'clock and a little bit tired, I'm going to see myself as somebody different again. And it's just really enjoying that part also of, yeah, just being and just showing up like what we are here now, and not really having a clue what we're going to talk about, but we know that we're going to have the time of our life anyway.
Right. You know, something that struck me, and the way I chose the theme for today, guided by the feeling of wisdom, is that when we talked on Salt Spring, I was struck by how you talked about the way you guys make decisions in your personal lives and your business lives, including decisions about coming to study with Elsie and Chip for 6 weeks, involving travel, and I think you did some house trading with folks, and just how things fell into place. And then I know this year you've had some really big personal changes. And you said more or less, I'm going to get this wrong, that at each decision point, when you would report on a decision, you would say, you know, it just had the right feeling, or we were thinking about doing this thing, but the feeling just wasn't quite right. So we waited and we waited and we waited, and then something changed and a new thing came up and it felt right. So how does that work in practice?
No idea.
Like,
absolutely no idea. And it's so interesting. This is the first webinar for a while, I think, that I've done about you. But it's so interesting, tying into what you've just pointed to there, Molly, to hear those bios being read back when everything now just seems so free-flowing in our lives. To define us in any moment just seems strange to me right now. And it is through following our hearts and just going with the flow and getting a feeling, getting a sense of something feeling right. And as you just said there, it has been, you know, where we started the year to where we are now is night and day different, completely different. And there were things, challenges that came into our lives, more notably for Steve, but still a big impact on myself as well, which not only kind of meant big personal changes, but also meant that logistically we've changed where we're living completely from where we'd actually uprooted ourselves at the tail end of last year to the beginning of this year to find ourselves in another place completely, and then finding a feeling to inform a decision to stay in this place because we had to be here because of a sickness in Steve's family, an illness. So how do we know that? How do we know how to follow what's there? And I think really it's just because there is a sense that something is right about that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. More than that, I've had experience this year of also getting quiet and hearing just whispers of things to follow. Hence, I mentioned I've gone back into working with not-for-profits, the voluntary sector as we know it in the UK, third sector. And seeing that I followed that and magic just happening in the moment and suddenly finding myself in a position that I kind of, the brain didn't plan out, or we didn't put it into action that way. It's almost like we're just guided by wisdom, guided by something within us, but almost greater than us, that's feeding us. I guess from the three principles understanding, we point to mind, the energy behind life, really navigating us through life when we're quiet enough to hear it. And that this year, I think we've had, I've certainly had experience of that, from the most frivolous, meaningless things to actually go, just hand it over to wisdom, hand it over to the feeling to see what happens, to, kind of the bigger stuff, business decisions, and obviously where we were going to live and what we were going to do with ourselves. So, and that just seems to be an ongoing process. And as I'm saying that, before I bring Steve in on this, that looseness, that just flowing with life, that rolling with it as well, there's less attachment to any of it. That's interesting. I'm just getting that now as we're kind of going through life. It's because we've had to let go a lot of stuff, both physically in terms of belongings, but also in terms of kind of constructs about where we should be and what we should be doing this year. We've had to kind of quickly move on and meet ourselves back in the moment of where we're at, having followed a feeling that's pointed us in a completely different direction, if that makes sense to people. So it's really just allowing ourselves to flow in life more, and not trying to figure it out, not trying to work it out. Because boy, I know I've had times when I've been sitting there waiting for the feeling to drop in, or waiting for wisdom to guide me. It doesn't work that way.
Well, that's my experience, that when I wait, I get into this, okay, where's the feeling? Where's the insight? Where's the inspiration? And there's a style of waiting that is pushy and expectant and contracted. And then there's a style of waiting, or a way of waiting, a feeling of waiting that is expanded and present and relaxed and connected. And I wonder what you can say, if anything, about those different ways of being until the inspiration or the idea shows up.
Sure, and it's interesting because when I was hearing Tony speak, what was kind of drifting into my consciousness was that not to really get lost in making wisdom a thing, not making the feeling a thing. When we begin to do that within our humanness, we make that as kind of a task or a chore or somewhere we have to get to or something we have to be in order for that to happen. But more, if we look at the spiritual fact that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then there isn't a moment where wisdom is not in action. The fact that you've just lifted your cup up there to do that, wisdom is guiding you. Wisdom is the creation of everything. It's the spiritual truth. And when we are with that, then our decisions making is not that we sit around and like, okay, so it's sat on this sofa again for the other day because wisdom's not kicked me in yet. It's still getting on with life and knowing that wisdom has our back. If wisdom is the truth, then it doesn't know anything like failure, upheaval, disappointment. It doesn't have any goals apart from just to come from the feeling of love, come from a neutral understanding, which means that everything is balanced, centered, and whole. Now, when we begin to recognize that we reside in those truths, there is such a profound calmness and clarity that we come from, that things that we perhaps wanted to do and gave ourselves a to-do list, they're done before we know it. Because we're not battling the other thinking thoughts that's come into action at that time. And that's when we begin to see the excitement of the world that we truly live in, of spontaneity, of excitement, of just knowing that we're always all okay. And the spiritual truth, we're always all okay. I'm not even getting into, well, actually, I was feeling, we were joking that we had to quickly do some errands in town before we came, and it was like, oh, guided by the feeling, we just want to sleep, never mind come and speak on air. And now it's like 2-3 hours down the line, we're in a completely different place. And it's recognizing that that's how we are moment to moment. There is the humanness, even though we are the spiritual being having the human experience, there's still the humanness that we have there. But we make our human experience much more difficult than what we have to. And more, like what Tony and I have recognized, is that the less we know, i.e. up here by thinking, well, I know what to do, I know where I need to go, the more we become.
Mm-hmm.
The more we become more from the heart. And the more that we begin to recognize truly the simplicity that lies within. And of course, seeing from the eyes of simplicity, then we see the world in the same way. Competition is gone, having to do is gone, and things just seem to fall into place. It's like there's a divine order in which we see life from the outside then beginning to happen. Because from the spiritual understanding, it really is an inside out, nothing outside there. Well, in fact, I remember when I read, first of all, from the teachings of Sydney Banks, who uncovered these principles, that there is no one outside of us. There is nothing outside of us until we think that they are. And my initial thought, because I wasn't into hearing these principles at the beginning, I was quite a rebel of doing my psychotherapy training. I was quite full, and it was like, I don't want to listen to anything else. It's like, it's all coming at me. When I heard that, it was like, what does it mean by that? But I knew the fact that I was quite antsy, that I was quite irritated by it, that there is a truth there, because something didn't sit right. Now, in that moment, I had the grace not to go looking for why it didn't feel right. I had the spiritual practice before, and I knew that, well, then my goal was to go and meditate, or to take moments, or to just be, maybe walking in nature. So there was something I knew that I could do which would allow me to naturally calm. Now I see now that it's not that I don't meditate, I don't go for walks, but my meditation is maybe sitting with my dog. The meditation could be sat in the back garden, it could be having a cup of tea, it could be anything. But it's the recognition that everything we seek is within.
Mm-hmm.
So if everything that we seek is within, then all the doing is unnecessary. But yet when we know that we're coming from the doing of wisdom, we fall in much more quicker and faster. The right people and experiences just seem to fall in, and it's like, how did this happen? I mean, Tony had a wonderful experience that with this job that he's doing. I don't mind if you want to have that feeling, because for me it just shows the magic of Tony sending off looking, did they want to do some pro bono work with them, just to kind of share the principles within there. I'm kind of sharing your story now. And long story short, he sent off his CV and looking at volunteering, and they came back and said, we'd like to offer you a job, a 6-month contract, and it's doing training. And it's like, it couldn't be even more perfect.
Yep.
Now, in that moment, what we recognized, what we did as a business opportunity, it was like, does this feel right? Now, if it doesn't there and then, maybe because one of us is tired or one of us is hungry, or it just doesn't feel right, we'll say, just leave it just now. And it might be 5 minutes later, yeah, I think it's fantastic. It might be the next morning, it's fantastic, or the day after. We don't go, right, is it there yet? Come on, Steve, have you made up your mind yet? We just know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference, that the wisdom comes with the knowing. And that we have started to trust so much in everything that we do. And Tony talked a little bit earlier on about us uprooting home. And that was from one end of England right up to the far north of England. And it wasn't a small thing for us, but the feeling was so pure, even though our thinking was like, we love our home. We love the view that we have. We have the rolling hills of the South Down around us. But our well-being doesn't depend on our property. Mm-hmm. It doesn't belong in the place that we live with the car that we have. And that's what we gently remind ourselves, that all these things don't define us. Because the happiest when we've been is when we're actually stripping back, where we're realizing that we don't need half of the things that we thought we did to make us happy.
Right.
And that's kind of at times bizarre, but it's more exciting.
Right.
Because we get to appreciate what we really do have and see that. And with our stuff being in for 8 months, it was in storage. And we were like 2 little boys at Christmas reopening this. Oh my God, I forgot we had this. Oh, I know where that's going to go. And it was like, who would have known that all this stuff that we've been collecting for years would bring us so much excitement? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the stuff we get rid of because the house isn't as big. But this came around from really, which I would have said is one of the most traumatic experiences in my life, which was the death of my mum. And what I recognized, Molly, was the fact that what I was saying to you about this spiritual being having the human experience is being there for myself like never before. Knowing I have the love of Tony and family and dear friends around me, but knowing that we can truly be there for ourselves like never before in every moment of the experience has allowed me to really see this with grace. And there's been moments where I've found myself getting caught. But I remember someone saying to me, well, how does this work? And the only thing that came to me was, well, you know, my mum can only die once. But the amount of thinking that I can do about it, I can torture myself. Or I can recognize it's thought and action in the moment. And it's me creating the thought. And I determine the experience that I will have. Mm-hmm. Now, I find that more liberating than, oh my God, this experience determines how I should be feeling in this moment. Mm-hmm. And that's the wisdom. And that's not saying that 24/7 we're that always. We are having the human experience, but we are the spiritual beings. And what we've recognized and seen the change in one another is the more that we simply stop and look within, everything we've been looking for is there. Love, wisdom, truth, honesty, compassion, always within. Never goes anywhere apart to serve us. And that's for me being guided by the feeling of wisdom of having to go, actually, what are we meaning by that? It's like, oh my goodness, this is much more than I could have thought. Mm-hmm. We allow wisdom to, Tony used the word, send the whispers. And recognizing that there's soul nudges that we receive, this little aha moments, or this little, okay, I'm going to grab the car keys and off I go, or I'm going to have a day in today, and all of a sudden you find yourself going somewhere and you meet people, or a book you've been looking for, or it's just recognizing that I get up the other morning and it was like, I haven't got a clue. There's a couple of things I want to do, but I don't know if I'm going to do them today. I'm just going to leave it completely up to what I'm doing, and I get so much accomplished. Mm-hmm. And
a couple of questions have come in.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the first one is, we're always okay, quoting you. But what about people in countries where there's war and torture, or mentally ill people who are in mental torture?
Yeah.
In what way are they always okay if they are?
It's a very interesting and very relevant question, isn't it, to what we're pointing to? And you know, I'm humbled by what some people in the world have to endure and face when we're so privileged to have the free lives and the beauty and the opportunities that we have in the Western world. So, you know, very, very relevant. And what we're talking about is kind of going beyond experience, going beyond what's on the surface level to what lies inside, and the capability of a human being, no matter what they're faced with, whatever challenges they're faced with, to turn inside, to look towards wisdom for ways to respond to those challenges. And as I'm speaking, I remember, I hope I get this guy's name right, Viktor Frankl.
That's whom I was thinking of, Viktor Frankl.
I think that's such a perfect example for people who don't know who he is or haven't read the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Fully recommend that book. But Viktor Frankl actually survived the concentration camps. And if my memory serves me well, he was helping other people. He was actually aware of not to get into the drama and the negativity of the situation. He stayed buoyant. Somehow he stayed positive in one of the most, I can't think of many more situations that could be so terrible in life as that. And he found a way out. He found a way out of the concentration camp, and hence he survived to write that book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that's just one example there of that. So somehow he understood this. And we're not talking about an intellectual understanding either here. Somehow he knew to stay buoyant, to stay plugged into wisdom, was just to stay positive and do what he could to alleviate the suffering that he saw around him. So I guess that's probably about the best I can answer or in terms of people facing kind of quite extreme situations around them. And boy, do we know there's a lot of those in the world today. The other part of the question was to people that are in mental despair, people who are dealing maybe with mental ill health or some challenges around that. And Steve and I have taken groups where we have worked with people in situations, people with various diagnoses of mental illness. And again, no exception, what we saw with people is when they started to see that they are the thinker, not what faults they're having, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the content of fault. When they started to see that they are the thinker and they're creating their own experience by putting energy into those thoughts, things started to loosen up. And just a nice little story, if I may share it, actually. One guy who, I'm not even aware of what his diagnosis was. The interesting thing is, Steve and I used to go and do these groups, and we didn't know any background to anybody in the groups, and we didn't talk about any of that stuff really, you know, kind of what the diagnosis was. We kept pointing people back to the three principles, but also kept pointing people back to being just a positive state, bringing the feeling into the trainings that we were doing. And this guy, apart from coming to the group and coming to the center, he wasn't going out. He was just sitting on his own, in his own flat, having quite a miserable time of life. I think he was quite isolated. And then one day he came in and he just looked different. He looked like somebody had done some plastic surgery on him. He just really looked buoyant. He looked happy. He said, said, you know what? He said, I can't come next week. I went straight to my head thinking, oh my God, because he's not getting anything from it. And he said, because I'm going to be volunteering. For the first time, I'm going back out into the world. And he said, and more than that, I found myself in my garden, clearing my garden up. I haven't been out there for ages, as well as going for nice walks. I've been out and about, and I even went and visited a friend, and he hadn't done that for I don't know how long. But again, something in him just came alive, lit up. He just knew there was something more to him, a hidden depth there, which again would show him the way forward. And time again, we've seen that in our work, haven't we? No matter what the circumstance and situation people are facing in life, without us addressing those situations, we've been talking about them plugging into this wisdom and finding their own way forward. So,
great.
Very long answer to that question, but I hope it's helpful.
Well, I think it deserves some time, because there's a way in which I know for me that there's a way in which I look to spiritual and psychological insight as a way out of life's problems. And, I'm looking for the escape hatch. I'm looking for the magic trick that will keep me from ever having to experience anything that I don't want to experience. And so far I haven't found that there's anything that does that the greatest insight in the world is not actually about escaping the human experience, but it's about having some insight, being able to see insightfully into how that experience is created through us from the inside out, and waking up to the ways that the wisdom that lives in us. I loved what you said earlier, Steve, about not externalizing wisdom, about not making it into a thing that's out there.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me, just in the last 24 hours, actually, I'm looking at the importance of and what it means to turn inside and to recognize that there is in me, as there is in each of us, an aliveness and an intelligence that is out of which I arise, and that I get to participate in that and collaborate in that as a conscious being. And I don't get to manipulate magically the outside world with that collaboration, but I dramatically create what I make of that outside world out of that collaboration. And Viktor Frankl is such a wonderful example. A fictional example is the movie Life is Beautiful from a number of years ago, an Italian movie, also about concentration camps.
We saw, yeah.
I think it's a wonderful film. And you can feel, it seems to me, the feeling that comes up in me as I watch that, I can feel the truth of the choices that the hero in that movie made. That the truth that the choice to see the beauty in life is available to me, not as a mental act, not as trying to think up beauty or trying to control it from that way, but more as a turning toward and discovery or uncovering of the beauty that is, and that's truly is always there. And I truly sometimes don't see it, but remembering that it's inside, it's more than inside, it's what we're made of, changes everything.
Absolutely. That's beautiful, Molly.
We have another question that I think is somewhat related to this idea of externalizing wisdom. It's, is this wisdom that we're talking about orchestrating all kinds of things for us all the time? I mean, is it an intelligence that's watching us and guiding others to come into our life, or nudging them to sell their houses, for instance, so that we can buy them? I mean, how does that work in?
We're going to get the manual out.
Yeah, that is such a beautiful question, and there's an excitement about what I hear from that question. There's an excitement, and I would say yes, but it's even more that. You know what? When Tony was speaking, I love what Tony was sharing, and again, this is for me what gets exciting, because we haven't got a clue what we're going to say when we came on here. We haven't spoke to you before. You gave us the title, and it's like, okay, let's just show up now. And then to be sat here with the excitement from someone joining us and asking us a question is something that I knew was available for us, but I didn't know how it would fall into place. So the knowing that there is a resiliency within us, that wisdom is, we can be in one moment of thinking, I'm really tired and I should be doing this, and the next minute we're off doing something, to being really exhausted and trying to get everything done, to all of a sudden just coming down in the middle of chaos, to all of a sudden thinking, there's the solution, there's the way that I want to go. And everything that was said in the question, is it those things? I know when you and I had and Tony had a little check-in, Molly, to get the link running on, there's an expression that I use, and I've heard, gosh, many years ago, there is not one spot where God is not.
Mm.
So there is not one spot where wisdom is not. There is not one spot where truth is not. And again, rather than it being, so what I don't want to get into is, how does it work? Tony says, where's the manual? Does it need batteries? Does the batteries come with it? Or
Right.
you don't have to get into any of that.
Yeah.
Inside of us is not even the manual. But this word truth keeps on coming to me today. This word truth. And I don't speak about it that often, but it's interesting, it's truth. And it's not our job to alleviate our consciousness. It's truth's job. It's not our job to evolve. It's truth's job. So we already have mind, thought, and consciousness that we see how we can react to the world. But we also have what Sydney Banks would call the divine. And the divine is the oneness that connects us all. And we just have to look at nature and how beautiful nature is, and how the seasons mean. We were just talking the other day when we were taking the dog out, that where we lived before was the rolling hills, but the exciting thing around here is, because there's all woodlands and forests walks around us, we get to see the aliveness of nature waking up, things unfurling, things doing what they were created to do. Now, they don't fight with one another. How come you're taller than me? Well, you're bigger than me. You're fatter than me. Well, you're more pretty. Oh, you smell beautifuler than me. They're just part of the great design.
Mm-hmm.
And as humans, what we do is we fight our natural resiliency and wisdom within by having to make it or conform it or point it in a direction because this feels right. But what we're pointing to is the fact that there isn't competition or game inside. In our thinking world there is. But what the principles are, or what we're saying and covers, is that we can see that it's not the fact that what we're thinking and what we're doing with our thinking, it's the fact that we have the gift to even think. Where does that come from? The fact that our body has been created in such a way, I mean, it amazes me when I started looking through the eyes of love and thinking, really, when you think of human beings, how we are created, it's really incredible that this flesh, this body can come together in such a way. It's incredible that we have, without having to think about it, organs inside of us, breathing and doing everything that we need to keep us alive. Now, there's wisdom. our body's doing what it's designed to do, and at any moment it will let us know, bleep bleep, I need you to just pay more attention to this. Well, mine says bleep bleep. I don't know everybody else. I mean, it's just, and it's just.
Yours is very polite. Mine doesn't use that one. You know what occurs to me, so speaking of bodies, I was just diagnosed with breast cancer. And so one might say, what's wisdom up to there? Mm. And does wisdom have a motive to teach me something through this? And the image I was getting as you were talking, Steve, is of a mandala or an unfolding design. And that there's an infinite number of pieces and aspects and dimensions to this unfolding mandala that's going on throughout all of time and space. And that to ascribe a motive to any one motion of any one piece from my limited thinking is nuts. You know, what as a collaborator in the creation of that mandala, I get to make choices about how I see my cancer, about kinds of treatment, about what I make of whatever changes come up in my life. And so I get to participate in the design, but it's not like I'm going to get graded on whether or not I do it right. I know I feel like there's a right way, and I want to find that right way, but I think that's fallacious. And that it's not that wisdom gets somebody to move house so that it becomes available so we can buy it. And I think sometimes in the spiritual communities, we talk as if, oh, this happened and that happened and it all worked out, as if there was a motive behind it to make it happen a certain way. But I think that the beauty and the intelligence in the system is bigger than that. And it's convenient to talk about things working out, because when we live in collaboration and in union and in acceptance and awe of the mystery of this unfolding design, it feels like it's working out. Yeah. That's not because somebody's managing the pieces. Right. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. Mm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I can get really trapped in thinking there's a right way through, and that if we find the right way through, wisdom will make really nice choices for me.
Mm-hmm. But whether it's the right way or the wrong way or somewhere in between or wherever it is, it's still a way through. It's still life showing up, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And kind of with the questions we've had so far in the conversation, for me, it's in the living. It's in just being ordinary, just coming back to our humble selves and just being in the moment as much as we possibly can, you know, recognizing sometimes we're not in the moment because we're caught up here about something. But again, just reorientating the thoughts back to, you know, kind of things that are good, positives in life, you know, looking around us for the beauty. And it's just in that I see, in that living, that's where it all springs from. How it works, I have no idea. Right. And actually, I'm kind of getting to a point where I don't even care. I don't want to be rude there or quite sharp with that, but it's almost like, because I'll never know. I know that I'll never know. Not intellectually, not from here. I'll never be able to work it out, how it works. I can't give myself the steps to how to access wisdom, let alone impart it to people on this call. You know, it's yours for the taking. It's within you. That's the simplicity, and it unfolds in us whether we like it or not. And we can either listen to it or we can ignore it completely. And where I've been this last year with the kind of on the surface, the ups and downs of life going on, to looking and seeing that at times this beautiful flourish of wisdom has come up and I've followed it, and it's manifested into something that I, you know, remarkable and wonderful. But then realizing, hey, that's always been the way anyway. It's just that I wasn't really listening to it, or I handed it over to the intellect, who then made kind of notes on it and you know, pros and cons, you know, and probably talked myself out of a lot of stuff. And that's fine. That's okay. That's life. That's freedom of choice. That's free will. I don't even want to make a judgment about that. But it's really just letting, you know, just like Steve pointed to nature, there's such a beautiful example and experience of this emotion. At the moment, we got roses in the garden, you know, in bloom here. Beautiful. How did they grow? How did they get to be so beautiful and give those scents out for us to enjoy and smell and the visual? And no idea at all, but they're there. And that's the same for us as human beings in terms of living our lives. We're here. And I'm reminded that Sid Banks said it's a mystical experience. We can't work it out, we can't figure it out, but we're alive. We're alive in the moment. And the simplicity of that, don't try and make it into something it's not, I guess, is what I want to say there. So
I'm thinking of one of my favorite quotes from Thomas Merton, that life is a mystery to be lived and not a problem to be solved.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Good old Thomas.
Beautiful. And I'll just add another one in there. There's a musician who passed away a number of years ago called Peter Christopherson, and he, one of his quotes that really struck me was that he said that life is full of magic. It's just that most people tend to not focus or look for the magic in life. They look in the opposite direction.
Yep.
And I know that was true. That's been true for me in times of life. But something again hit me when I heard that quote, because it just was like, gosh, yeah, that's so true. And that's what people are looking for, just that recognition of truth.
Mm-hmm.
They touched on truth.
Right.
Something that lights you up, something that grabs your attention, that feels right, that feels solid.
Right. You know, we have a really lovely question here that goes to the intersection of many things we've talked about, and it's about it unfolding. Right now, I'm trying to decide whether to buy a car. I really want it, but I don't know if I'll run out of money toward the end of my life. Do I trust that it will work out? And I'm thinking of, if we look too hard to find answers that will manipulate the outside world, I just end up more confused.
Yeah, you know, it speaks to me. One of the things with us, what we've recognized, Molly, is that it really is true that we only ever really have this moment. If we look at that, the gift of the creation of thought is moment to moment, then I don't see that I have a future, but I know I have moments to live through. And what I mean by that is that we thought that we were moving to a part of the world, and we looked at the amount of houses, in the end I was like, if I ever see a new house again in my life, I want to stop. It was just like stunning houses, and one of us would be like, it's not feeling right. Now we knew that was enough to actually trust. Now, that's all we knew. And that moment doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Now, what we have seen is the magic really, how Tony talked about with that quote there, playing itself out. And with us going with the flow of the river rather than trying to push the river and get soaking wet, because you can't push the river, you just have to go with the flow. Life presented itself in the way to us that it was like, oh, this feels right. Oh, this feels good. And it's not that we're sitting waiting on the feeling. And it's not that sometimes, you know, it's just like, well, right now, I want to get a new car. And if this truly feels right, I'm going to do that, because it will take care of itself as I move forward. Because in that moment, it's almost like saying, well, if I get that, it's going to limit what's coming to me. rather than just being in that moment. If it really feels right, not as in, yeah, but it'll be great driving down the street, but if it feels right, if that sense rather than I know, because I've done so many things with just a sense and not knowing how it was going to fall out, and really recognizing in the grand scheme of things, I know nothing.
Right.
And if I turn up each moment in that nothingness, then I learn as I'm going along. It's like baby steps all over again. But it's baby steps of, when we say the great unfolding, and earlier on when I say there is not one spot where God is not, Sydney Banks would talk about it as a spiritual formless intelligence. Now, some people call that God, some people call it Buddha, some people call it different things. But if we look at that, we are that intelligence in action. Don't get caught up in the mundane things and the fearful things. Look at the wonder that you truly are. Look at the excitement that you truly are in that moment of creation. And that each moment there is fresh thought of this intelligence, there is fresh thought and wisdom coming through, and it's like a blank canvas. And you can paint anything on that that you wish. Now, if you realize that that's your true potential, then you drop into the fact of not knowing there's a future, but yet there's a moment to be blessed in. There's a moment to embrace the divine that we are, which means, again, looking through those eyes, everything just seems not like, I hope I'm not painting it's just like everything seems tickety-boo and everything in the garden is full of roses and smiling. I've just come through as what I say is one of the worst experiences that I perceived all my life. Mm-hmm. Especially the last 7 years, I lived in the fear of when that actually would happen. Now, when I saw that I didn't truly know what would happen until the moment happened, it just freed me so much. It freed me up of what I thought would happen, how I would react, what kind of Prozac I would need to go on, that I wouldn't be sleeping, that I would be depressed. And that hasn't happened. But yet what I've seen is the experience of being there for me, and that's what I recognized is readily available for everyone. No matter what's going on, there's always fallback. There's always wisdom within to fall back to. Like the soft duvet or the soft waterbed or whatever we want to imagine. But there's always that wisdom there. And I know I've kind of going off in a different way from should I be buying my car, but that decision is something that only truly we can make ourselves.
Right. Well, in the intelligence that guides you to buy it or not today will be there for you in 4 or 5 years.
Right.
When you need money.
Absolutely.
So I'm not saying what the heck, you might as well spend all your money today because there's intelligence forever.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of in love with common sense as a form of wisdom.
Yeah.
And if I have a kind of settled neutral, it's funny to say neutral and positive, but it's like a settled neutral positive feeling, then I tend to go ahead with something. If I feel settled about the decision, I'll go ahead with it. And if I feel unsettled, all I really know is that it's not right yet. Mm-hmm. It might be right in 10 years, it might be right in 10 minutes, but it's not right yet.
Beautiful.
And for me, there's a place for considering things like how much money do I have and could I do the payments and what are the interest rates and what's my income. And then there's a time to set all that aside because I get in, when I'm debating with myself, I'm unsettled.
Yeah.
And when I'm unsettled, wisdom and common sense can't arise. I can't hear them for all the noise. So I guess the practical guidance I give myself is, to the best of my ability, to set the debate aside and then see what shows up as my common sense at a later moment.
Beautiful.
And know that no matter what I do, there's no such thing as the right decision, because there's no such thing as the wrong decision. There's just, as you say, an ongoing present, and that design it'll be a different design if you buy a car than if you don't, but it will still be an unfolding design.
Yeah. And it's just like us with the house, Molly, that we had the picture in our mind, and because of the way that the house prices are down south to further up north, it's much, much, much cheaper to buy up there, that we could have bought a house outright, had no mortgage. So all the signs, all the ticking boxes were correct for us to be buying, but yet it did not feel right. So we trusted that. And then the way life came in, which kind of to some people looks like we were giving a curveball, but we actually embraced what was happening. And now we have a house which is smaller than what we were aiming for, but we says to everyone, and I've lost count how many times, it's like through the years, the furniture we've been buying was for this house. Everything just fits like a hand into a glove. So just trusting that that's how it's fallen in, and we see that more and more and more, not just with us, but with everyone.
And also, just coming in on the back of that as well, seeing it play out time and time again in our lives anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, you know, it's things work out. They just do, you know, and the more we're in the flow of that, the easier our experience of life is.
Right.
But even there, I'm aware of what I'm saying can look like a bit of a doing. There really is no doing. It's just aware when we're in a clear mind, when we're flowing with the feeling, wisdom, whatever makes sense to people, common sense, because this really is common sense. And then aware when we're caught up, when we're trying to figure it out, when we're trying to work it out, or we're orientated towards something that's troubling us that we perceive as a problem or a concern. And Steve has a lovely, lovely saying on that, actually, that I've been busted quite a bit this year on at times when I've got caught up, or, you know, there's a feeling that's come in that's got a charge of negativity about it, and I can feel myself orientating myself into it, and I'll start going, you know, expressing, oh yeah, this is terrible because of it, and Steve will simply say, yeah, and full stop. And it's beautiful because it just reminds me, yeah, I don't have to go there. Okay.
Right.
And I can cut myself loose and just reorientate myself again. And things just pass on. Doesn't mean, you know, we're not talking about controlling states of being or mind or whatever here. It's really is just letting ourselves flow through life, recognizing where we're at. It's all just levels of consciousness. That's all it is. From the most horrible state that we can perceive to the most joyful, liberating state. They're all transient. Life goes up and down, you know. And there's no, you know, the more we try and lever ourselves into a state of consciousness, the more we're not going to be able to do that. So it's really just being kind to ourselves, letting ourselves be, and realizing that we are well-being. We are that well-being within. You know, going back to the car can't bring you any well-being, and if there's any feeling around that there's well-being tied into that, say, well, maybe that's something to look at there. It's fine to feel great when we've bought something new, for sure, of course, you know, that's life. We're human beings. To nurture ourselves is lovely, but not to get overly tied up that, well, I'll be happy when this happens, or, you know, when this situation is sorted out, or when I've got this lovely new car. So really it's that, again, I'm just reminded about that magic, that creativity, you know, that life is a big playground. Let's just go and play in it and see what shows up. And that's definitely been more and more showing up for us. Even when we thought it hasn't been showing up for us, it just meant that, you know, we wasn't in a receptive state. We just needed to quieten down a bit more and let things flow on.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much. This has been a very rich hour. Thank you everyone for watching, and for those of you who are watching on the replay. What's your website, guys, so people can follow up with you?
It's 3P, so it's the number 3, letter P, livesoul.co.uk.
And I will also put that on the Hangout page so people can go through. Yeah. Great. Thanks again, guys. It has been wonderful.
Thoroughly enjoyed it too, Molly. It's been great hanging out with you.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Molly.
Yeah.
And to everybody for the questions. Great questions.
Yeah, beautiful questions.
Yeah.
Any more questions, then email us. We'd love to answer.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, we'll do it again.
That would be great. Let's not leave it a year this time, though.
Okay. I promise.
Hey, let's do it on Salt Spring next time.
Yeah.
Fun. I'm up for that. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.